Number 17, meatloaf with tomato glaze and green beans. In 1912, a New Yorker could drop a single nickel into a slot, turn a chrome knob, lift a little glass door, and pull out a hot bowl of macaroni and cheese. No waiter, no tip, just gleaming marble, stained glass, and food that was somehow genuinely good. They called it the Automat, and for almost 80 years it fed the whole city. Millionaires sat next to dock workers, and every one of them threw nickels. Number 14 on this list shocked people so badly that diners dared each other to order it. Number 3 vanished so completely that bakers today cannot recreate it. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 forgotten Automat foods every New Yorker dropped a nickel for, now gone forever. Number 25, Boston baked beans. Before the Automat sold a single hot entree, it sold 3 things: buns, fish cakes, and beans. The baked beans were there on opening day in 1912, and they never left. A worker on his lunch break would drop a nickel, turn the knob, and pull out a small dish of navy beans, baked low and slow with salt pork and dark molasses until they turned deep brown and almost sweet. Horn and Hardart baked roughly 200 gallons a day at their commissary, never canned, never rushed, then shipped them hot to every restaurant in the city. Old-timers will tell you the real move was reaching for the free mustard on the Lazy Susan and stirring a spoonful right into the dish, a nickel and a turn of the wrist, and you had a meal that stuck to your ribs through a full shift on the docks. Number 24, the hard roll and butter. This sounds like nothing. It was everything. The Automat roll was a crusty, golden hard roll baked fresh in the commissary that very morning, never the day before, because Horn and Hardart had a rule that nothing stale ever touched a slot. You dropped your nickel, the door opened, and there it sat with a foil-wrapped pat of cold butter beside it. For a person down to their last few coins, this was survival. For everyone else, it was the thing you tore apart to sop up bean liquor, gravy, or the bottom of a soup bowl. The company baked something like 2,500 rolls and loaves every single day before dawn. A roll that good for a nickel does not exist in this city anymore. We replaced it with a plastic clamshell and a packet of margarine, and we called that progress. Number 23, mashed turnips. Here is a vegetable that has almost completely disappeared from American plates, and the Automat served it by the ton. Yellow turnips, what your grandmother called rutabaga, were boiled until soft, then mashed with butter, salt, and a heavy crack of black pepper until they turned a warm gold. They were earthy, faintly sweet, and a little peppery, the kind of side dish that cost the company almost nothing and filled a plate beautifully. A dish ran a nickel. People paired it with the Salisbury steak or the beef stew, and it soaked up gravy better than potatoes did. Turnips fed a working city through the Depression without anyone feeling like they were eating poverty food, because at the Automat it arrived steaming in a clean dish behind polished glass. Today you would have to hunt to find mashed turnips on any menu in New York. Back then it was just Tuesday. Number 22, Harvard beets. The Automat had a way of taking the humblest vegetable and dressing it up like it belonged at a banquet. Harvard beets were sliced beets simmered in a glossy sweet and sour sauce of sugar, vinegar, and a little cornstarch until they turned almost ruby and shone like glass behind the little door. The vinegar cut the sweetness, and the sugar tamed the vinegar. The result was a tangy, bright side dish that made a plate of beef look like a real dinner instead of just brown food. It was one of the dozen recipes the company considered so iconic that when 2 entrepreneurs bought the bankrupt Horn and Hardart name in the 1990s, Harvard beets were one of the first dishes they recreated to sell in supermarkets. People remembered them that strongly. Number 21, cucumber salad. On a hot August day in a city with no air conditioning, the cool cases of the Automat were a kind of mercy, and the cucumber salad was the coolest thing in them. Thin sliced cucumbers and onion, laid in a vinegar dressing with a little sugar and dill, chilled until crisp and almost frosty. It was sharp, refreshing, and clean, the perfect counterweight to all that baked beans and Salisbury steak. A dish was a nickel. Office girls on their lunch break ate it standing up. What is remarkable is how plain it was. Cucumbers, onion, vinegar, sugar. But it was made fresh every morning and pulled the moment it lost its snap. And that discipline is exactly what we lost when the slots went dark. Number 20, creamed spinach. If the Automat had a vegetable hall of fame, creamed spinach was first ballot. This was not the sad, watery spinach of a school cafeteria. This was spinach cooked down and folded into a rich, velvety white sauce of butter, flour, milk, and a whisper of nutmeg until it turned into something so luxurious that children who hated spinach ate it without a fight. It came alongside the Salisbury steak more often than not, and regulars would tell you the steak was just an excuse to order the spinach. A dish cost a nickel or a dime. The genius was the sauce, a proper bechamel made in volume by cooks who could do it in their sleep, which meant no lumps, no scorch, no bitterness every single time. Steakhouses in this city still sell creamed spinach for $14 and act like they invented it. The Automat was feeding it to streetcar conductors for the price of a newspaper. We did not lose the recipe. We lost the price. Here is where it gets interesting. First pattern break. Walk into an Automat in 1935, and the first thing you saw was a woman in a glass booth with rubber tips on her fingers. They called her the nickel thrower. You slid her a quarter or a dollar, and in one blurring motion she counted out your nickels and sent them sliding across a marble dish without ever looking down. These women handled thousands of coins a day, and their speed was a citywide legend. Behind them rose the wall, row after row of little chrome-framed glass windows, each one lit, each one holding a sandwich or a slice of pie or a bowl of beans like a tiny museum case. You window shopped your dinner. And here is the part that delighted everyone, especially children. The second you pulled your food and the door swung shut, a disembodied hand appeared from behind the wall and slid a fresh dish into the empty slot. Like magic. Like the food made itself. That was the whole spell of the Automat, and no drive-through has ever come close. Number 19, split pea soup. Horn and Hardart moved 300 gallons of soup a day, and the split pea was the one people wrote letters about decades later. Dried green peas simmered for hours with a ham bone until the peas dissolved into a thick, smoky, almost green velvet that could hold a spoon upright. No cream, no flour, just peas surrendering their starch and a ham bone giving up everything it had. You pulled a bowl from the heated slot, grabbed a hard roll, and you had a complete meal for under a dime. Nothing tired ever reached a customer. The soup was held only as long as it stayed good, then dumped. For an old man on a thin pension, a bowl of that pea soup and a roll was dignity you could afford. It tasted like somebody's mother had stood over the pot, even though that mother was a commissary kitchen feeding 700,000 people a day. Number 18, mashed potatoes. You cannot talk about the Automat without the mashed potatoes because half the menu was just a delivery system for them. Real potatoes, peeled and boiled and whipped with butter and milk into a cloud so light that diners specifically remembered them as the fluffiest they ever ate. They arrived in a snowy heap, usually with a well in the middle waiting for gravy, and they came under the Salisbury steak beside the beef stew next to the chopped sirloin. A scoop was a nickel. What people forget is how hard it is to make great mashed potatoes for a city. Do it wrong and you get glue. The commissary cooks whipped them in volume and got them right every time, light and hot and never gummy. When the chain finally died, regulars would describe those potatoes with a faraway look, the way you describe a person you lost. Instant flakes from a box took over American kitchens in the years after, and a whole generation forgot what a real potato whipped by a real cook actually tasted like. Number 17, codfish cakes. This was one of the originals on the wall from the very beginning, and for a lot of New Yorkers it was the taste of the place. Dried salt cod, soaked overnight to draw out the salt, then flaked and bound with mashed potato, egg, and onion, shaped into thick patties and fried until the outside went deep gold and crackling while the inside stayed soft and steamy. Old customers swore by the big fish cakes, and the truly devoted ordered them the same way every time, with tomato sauce ladled over the top and a scoop of mac and cheese on the side. A fish cake cost a nickel, later a dime, and on a Friday it fed half the Catholic city that would not touch meat. The salt cod kept for ages, the potato stretched it cheap, and the frying made it feel like a treat. People have spent years on message boards begging for the exact recipe because they can still taste it, and nothing on a menu today comes close. Number 16, chicken pot pie. When the wall worked its magic and that little door swung open on a chicken pot pie, you knew you were about to eat well for almost nothing. A flaky crust, golden and blistered, hiding a bubbling stew of tender chicken, carrots, peas, and onion in a gravy thick enough to cling to a fork. It was the Automat at its most comforting, the meal you got on a cold, gray day when you needed the city to feel like home for 10 minutes. A line of cooks at a revolving table each did one job: crust, filling, top, trim, 6 pies a minute into ovens that turned like Ferris wheels. That kind of assembly let them sell a real chicken pot pie, made with real chicken, for a dime. There was no shortcut in the food, only in the system that built it. We kept the shortcut and threw away the food. Number 15, beef stew. Cheap cuts, long time, deep flavor. That was the formula, and the Automat ran it perfectly. Chunks of beef browned and simmered for hours with carrots, onions, and potatoes until the meat went fork tender and the broth turned dark and glossy and rich. It came hot from the steam slot, a full bowl, the kind of thing a man who worked with his hands could lean into after a long shift. A bowl ran a dime, maybe 15 cents in the leaner post-war years. The beauty of stew is that it forgives cheap meat, and the commissary used that to feed a working city protein it could afford. It was made from scratch, held only while it was good, and served on real china with real silverware at a marble table, which is more than you can say for almost anything you can buy for the same money today. Number 14, Salisbury steak with mashed potatoes. This was the heavyweight champion of the Automat dinner, the plate that defined the place for millions of people. A thick, oval patty of seasoned ground beef, broiled and smothered in a deep brown onion gravy, slumped against a mountain of those famous, fluffy mashed potatoes, usually with creamed spinach or Harvard beets crowded onto the plate beside it. It was hot, heavy, and deeply satisfying, the kind of meal that sent you back out into the cold feeling like you could take on the city again. A full plate was well under $1 into the 1950s. So many people have hunted for this exact recipe over the years that even the company historians admit they never found it. The Salisbury steak walked out the door with the last cook and never came back. Here is what most people never saw. Second pattern break. The magic of the wall depended on a machine you were never meant to notice. Every dish you pulled came from a central commissary, an industrial kitchen where an army of cooks prepared everything from scratch under a man named Horn, who treated food quality like a religion. At 12:30 every single day, managers and the head chef gathered in a room with a long wooden table called the sample room and tasted everything: soups, entrees, desserts, even the butter, because if it was not right, it did not ship. And the rules were merciless. Coffee brewed every 20 minutes and was dumped after an hour. Fresh squeezed orange juice that sat 2 hours went down the drain. The Automat looked like a vending machine, but behind that wall was the most disciplined kitchen the city ever ran, and it ran on the belief that poor people deserved fresh food too. Number 13, chopped sirloin steak. For the customer who wanted to feel like he was eating a real steak dinner without paying for one, the chopped sirloin was the answer. A patty of better grade ground beef, broiled and served with gravy and those mashed potatoes, a notch up from the Salisbury, a little richer, a little more like the steakhouse meal a working man could not otherwise afford. Regulars had their loyalties and would argue them, the chopped sirloin people versus the Salisbury people, the way fans argue about ball players. It was a few cents more than the cheapest plate, but still a fraction of what a sit-down restaurant charged. That was the quiet revolution of the Automat. A man in work clothes could buy himself a steak dinner, sit at a marble table under a stained glass window, and nobody made him feel small about it. The food was good, and the dignity was free. Number 12, Creole honeycomb tripe. Here is the one that makes modern diners flinch, and the one that proves the Automat fed a city that wasted nothing. Tripe is the lining of a cow's stomach, the honeycomb kind prized for the way it holds sauce, and Horn and Hardart simmered it Creole style for hours in a tomato sauce loud with onions, peppers, and spice, until the tough, chewy meat went tender and soaked up all that flavor. To a lot of New Yorkers, especially immigrants and older folks who grew up eating every part of the animal, this was a delicacy, a dish you sought out, not settled for. To a squeamish office worker, it was unthinkable. But it was cheap, it was nourishing, and it honored the whole animal the way nearly everyone's grandparents once did. The Automat put it behind glass right next to the chicken pot pie. No shame, no apology, just another nickel dish. Try finding Creole tripe on a menu in this city now. The dish did not just fade. The whole idea behind it faded with it. Number 11, macaroni and cheese. If one dish is the Automat, it is this one. The mac and cheese was an instant classic from the start and stayed the single most beloved item on the wall for 80 years. Elbow macaroni folded into a sauce built from a real roux, butter and flour cooked down, then milk and cream and sharp cheese stirred in until it turned into something glossy and rich, baked until the top went golden and just slightly crisp at the edges. It was velvety, it was decadent, and it cost a nickel, later a dime. When the New York Public Library mounted an exhibit about the Automat, the recipe they handed out to visitors through a working glass door was the mac and cheese, because that is the one everybody wanted to take home. The cheapest comfort food in the city was also the best, because somebody insisted on making it right. Number 10, baked apples. Long before anyone counted a calorie, the Automat baked whole apples until they slumped into something halfway between fruit and dessert. A cored apple stuffed with sugar and cinnamon, sometimes a few raisins, baked slow until the skin wrinkled and split, and the inside went soft and syrupy and golden. It sat in the case, glistening in its own juices, and you pulled it for a nickel. For an older customer with bad teeth, it was a sweet they could actually eat. For a child, it was a treat that felt almost like getting away with something. The aroma of baking apples and cinnamon was part of the smell of the whole place, mixed with coffee and fresh bread. It was humble and old-fashioned even then, the kind of thing your great-grandmother made, and that was exactly the point. The Automat was modern on the outside, all chrome and glass, but the food inside was the food of home, made by people who still believed an apple and some cinnamon was worth doing properly. Here is something the menu never advertised. Third pattern break. The Automat was the most democratic room in America, and almost nobody talks about why that mattered. In a city full of restaurants that would seat you based on your skin, your accent, or whether you came in alone, the Automat seated everyone because there was nobody to seat you. A woman dining by herself, who might be turned away or stared at elsewhere, could eat in peace. People of color, who were refused at counters all over mid-century America, were as welcome at the Automat as anyone because the wall did not care who dropped the nickel. Colin Powell ate there as a kid from the South Bronx. Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner, a future Supreme Court justice, all of them, sharing marble tables with strangers. And for the truly broke, there was a quiet kindness built into the room. You could take a free cup of hot water from the spout, stir in free ketchup from the Lazy Susan, and make yourself a thin tomato soup for nothing at all. Nobody stopped you, nobody shamed you. That was the Automat. Number 9. Vanilla ice cream. In an age before every freezer aisle overflowed, Automat vanilla ice cream was the real thing, and people remembered it as such for the rest of their lives. Dense, cold, and flecked with the tiny black specks of actual vanilla beans, not flavoring, not a chemical approximation, it was the genuine article churned at the commissary and kept cold in the chilled slots. A dish was a nickel. A generation of New York children learned what vanilla actually tasted like from that little glass door. The detail people always bring up first is those black specks, proof you were eating something made with care. The cheapest dessert in the building still used the good stuff. When the Automats closed, that standard did not transfer to whatever replaced them, and we have been eating the difference ever since. Number 8, cup custard. This was the gentlest thing on the wall, the dish you reached for when you were tired or sick or just needed something soft and sweet to end the meal. A simple baked custard of eggs, milk, sugar, and vanilla, set in its own little cup, smooth and trembling, dusted with nutmeg across the top. You pulled it cold from the slot for a nickel. It was nursery food, the kind of thing made for invalids and children, and that was exactly why grown adults loved it, because it tasted like being taken care of. There is real skill hidden in a plain cup custard. Bake it too hot, and it turns to scrambled eggs and weeps water. The commissary cooks got it silky every time, hundreds of cups a day. You will still find a sad version in a plastic 4-pack at the supermarket. The Automat made it from 4 ingredients and a careful oven, and that was the whole difference. Number 7, tapioca pudding. Ask anyone who ate at the Automat what they miss, and a startling number will say the tapioca in a voice that drops like they are talking about a lost relative. Large pearl tapioca soaked overnight, then cooked slow with milk, eggs, sugar, and a little cinnamon and vanilla, until the pearls swelled into soft, translucent beads, suspended in a warm, creamy custard. It was rich without being heavy, sweet without being cloying, and it had that texture nothing else has, those gentle little pearls giving way against your spoon. A dish was a nickel. People have written that the only tapioca they ever truly loved was the Automats, eaten as a child while their grandmother carried home the groceries, and that nothing on a shelf today can touch it. It is a humble pudding, but it carries 80 years of memory in it, because for so many New Yorkers, it was the small, sweet reward at the end of a hard, cheap, honest meal. Number 6, rice pudding with raisins. Right beside the tapioca sat its great rival, and households were divided over which was better. Rice pudding the Automat way meant tender grains of rice, slow cooked in sweetened milk and eggs, until the whole thing thickened into a warm, comforting custard, studded with plump raisins, and finished with a dusting of cinnamon. It was the dessert of choice for the customer who wanted something filling enough to almost be a meal, and on a thin budget it sometimes was the meal. A dish cost a nickel. The raisins were the whole event, swollen and sweet, scattered through the pale pudding like little treasures, and children would eat around the rice to save them for last. There is a reason rice pudding and tapioca and cup custard all sat in those cases at once. The Automat understood that the end of a meal, even a 5-cent meal, deserved a sweet, and it gave the working city 3 of them to choose from. Number 5, coconut cream pie. Now we are into the pies, and the pies were the glory of the Automat. The coconut cream sat behind its little door, looking like something out of a dream. A crisp pastry shell filled with thick, silky vanilla custard, crowded with shredded coconut, and crowned with a tall cloud of whipped cream and a snow of toasted coconut on top. You dropped a dime. The door opened, and you carried away a slice that looked like it belonged in a fine bakery window, not a coin-operated cafeteria. That is how a slice this good cost a dime. People remember the coconut cream the way they remember a first apartment or a first kiss, with a specific, aching fondness, because it was a little piece of luxury that anybody, absolutely anybody, could afford. That was the promise of the place, made edible and topped with whipped cream. Here is how it all ended. 4th pattern break. For almost 50 years the spell held, and then a single nickel broke it. On November 28, 1950, Horn and Hardart did the unthinkable and raised the price of a cup of coffee from 1 nickel to 2 nickels. Buses had gone up. Phone calls had gone up. But the nickel coffee was sacred, and the day it became a dime, something cracked. The year before the change, New Yorkers drank 70 million cups. The year after, 45 million. People felt betrayed by a number, and the world was already turning against the place. Families fled to the suburbs, where you needed a car and a drive-through, not a marble hall downtown. McDonald's and Burger King rose up offering cheap, fast, forgettable food, and Horn and Hardart, in a final irony, started buying those very franchises to survive. The grand halls grew shabby. The food slipped, and one by one the walls went dark, until the last Automat in New York, at 42nd and 3rd, closed its glass doors forever in 1991. Number 4, pumpkin pie. Of all the Automat pies, the pumpkin carried the most weight because it was the centerpiece of something the place did better than anyone. If you were alone in New York at Thanksgiving, broke, far from family with nowhere to go, you could walk into the Automat and have a real holiday dinner for a few coins and end it with a slice of pumpkin pie, and nobody would treat you like a charity case. That mattered to thousands of people in a city full of the lonely. The pie itself was the commissary at its peak, a custardy pumpkin filling deep orange and spiced with cinnamon and clove, set in a flaky crust, turned out by the thousands on that synchronized line. A slice was a dime. It tasted like somebody's home, even when you had no home to go to. That is the thing about the Automat that no fast food chain ever replicated. It did not just sell you dinner. On the hardest days of the year, it sold you the feeling of belonging somewhere for the price of a slice of pie. Number 3, huckleberry pie. Here is the one that vanished most completely. The slice that people describe and then say, almost angrily, that you simply cannot get anymore. Huckleberries are a wild, tart, deep purple cousin of the blueberry, and the Automat baked them into a pie that practically burst when you cut it. Dark juice running across the plate, the flavor brighter and wilder and more intense than any blueberry pie you have ever had. It was a seasonal treasure, and regulars knew to grab a slice the moment it appeared behind the glass. A slice was a dime. The reason it is gone is bigger than the Automat. Huckleberries resist farming. They grow where they want, in the wild, and they were always laborious and expensive to gather, which is exactly why finding a perfect huckleberry pie for a dime at a coin-operated cafeteria was a small miracle nobody appreciated until it was over. The recipe is not really lost. The world that could put wild huckleberries behind a 5-cent door is what is lost, and it is not coming back. Number 2, lemon meringue pie. The showstopper of the pie case, the one that stopped foot traffic. A crisp pastry shell filled with a lemon custard so bright and tart it made you squint, then piled high with a towering golden meringue, swirled into peaks and browned just at the tips. It sat behind its little window catching the light, and you knew before you tasted it that this was the slice that proved the Automat could do elegance. The tartness cut clean through after a heavy plate of Salisbury steak and gravy. The meringue dissolved on your tongue, and it cost a dime. A pie like that takes real technique, a custard that sets without weeping, and a meringue that holds its peaks without collapsing, the kind of thing home bakers dread and commissary cooks did in their sleep thousands at a time. It was beauty you could buy with pocket change, served on real china under a stained glass ceiling. Try to picture where in this city you could get that today, at any price. You cannot. That world is gone. Number 1, the Gilt Edge Nickel Coffee. Everything else on this list was the meal. This was the soul. For nearly 50 years you dropped 1 nickel, and from a gleaming silver spout, shaped like a dolphin's head, found in Italy by Joe Horn himself, poured a precise, generous cup of coffee that people swore was the best in New York. They called it Gilt Edge, a French drip brew with a little chicory in it, lightened not with milk, but with real cream. The rule was iron. Brewed fresh every 20 minutes, dumped after 1 hour, never a stale cup served. By the middle of the century, they were pouring around 90 million cups a year, and Irving Berlin loved it so much he wrote a song called Let's Have Another Cup of Coffee that became the unofficial anthem of the whole place during the Depression, when a nickel coffee and a dime slice of pie were just about all the hope a person could afford. That dolphin spout, that nickel, that first hot sip under the stained glass, that is the thing every New Yorker who lived it still misses most. Not because of the coffee, because of who they were when they drank it. Here is my challenge. Next time you make a pot of coffee, drink it slow at a table instead of rushing it out the door. Make a real cup custard from scratch, just eggs and milk and sugar and a careful oven, the way the Automat did, and tell me it does not taste like something we forgot. Because these were not just nickel dishes behind little glass doors. They were proof that a great city once believed that working people, lonely people, broke people, all of them deserved fresh food, made with care, served with dignity, for the price of a coin. Drop the dish you wish you could try in the comments. I want to know if the huckleberry pie gets more love than the mac and cheese, because that wall is gone now. But the people who threw those nickels never forgot a single bite.